Because again, if you lend me money, you lend me $5,000. I tell you, yeah, I'm going to pay you back on schedule and so on. This is the schedule we come up with. You tell me, we agree to it. I sign the document, whatever the case is, but I don't stick to it. And I miss payments. And I tell you, oh, I'll get you next week. Or I'll get you in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, you're depending on my money to pay the mortgage. Meanwhile, you're depending on my money to pay you so that you can then, send your kids to school or whatever it might be. You're going to have a problem with me and you might never lend me money again, right? Now, if I go to somebody else and you tell them that experience you had with lending me money before, they're probably not going to lend me money. This is your credit report. This is how it works. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Success Spectrum podcast. I'm your host, Kadeem, sharing stories, insights, and strategies to help you on the pursuit of becoming the next best version of you. Today, we're talking about debt and credit. All right, specifically mastering debt and credit. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. Now, a lot of people think that all debt is bad debt, but I'm here to tell you otherwise, right? Not all debt is bad debt. There's two types of debt. There's actually good debt and bad debt. And of course, they affect you differently. Now, when you think about bad debts, that's what most of us are familiar with, right? And essentially, to put it simply, again, it's a liability. So we have assets in life and we have liabilities in life. Liabilities or bad debts take money out of your pocket, and assets put money in your pocket. Synonymous, a good debt puts money in your pocket. All right? They pay you essentially. A liability could be a student loan, right? Your car payment. Because as soon as you drive your car off the lot, it loses interest, or rather it loses value. It depreciates, right? So your cell phone, if you finance your cell phone, that's essentially a bad debt because it's taking money out of your pocket and is depreciating in value. An asset, on the other hand, is something that will increase in value, or a good debt will increase in value, right? So you could actually turn your bad debts into good debts because your car, just a quick strategy, your vehicle, it's a bad debt, but you can turn it into a good debt because how you use your vehicle can then pay you. So let's say your payment for your vehicle, your finance is $200 a month. If you now, get decal on your car or stickers, because you can get companies that'll pay you to put their promotions on your vehicle, or you use your vehicle for some type of service to make money that pays you more than $200 a month. Now it's an asset because it's paying you. Right? It's a good debt. So again, there's good debts and there's bad debts, and they affect you differently. Along that line, your bad debt, like I said, can eat away at your income. So be careful with that, because a lot of us think we don't have enough money to begin with. But if you have bad debts, that's probably leading you to that conclusion, right? Because you look at all of your income that you have, $5,000, let's say, but you're paying out $3,000 or $2,000, maybe even $2,500 for debt. Bad debts. That's not really helping you. Of course, you feel like you have no income because it's all being eaten up by the debt that you have. Right? The money you make isn't yours. You don't get to keep it in your pocket because you're putting it all out for bad debts. Now, the importance of good debt, again, it helps you with that financial stress that I often talk about, that financial insecurity, because having good debts, that you're not using your finances in a bad way, or the credit you have available to you in a bad way, or using it for gains and returns. Okay. And we'll talk about that a little bit throughout this episode. The next thing is strategies to manage and pay off debt. Because of course, a lot of us have debt, and we may not know necessarily the best approach to paying those off. So I'm going to go ahead and give you some of those strategies right here. One of them is called the snowball method, which we've often heard, right? The snowball method. So what that is if you have a bunch of different debts, say you have a $2,000, a $5,000, a $10,000 debt. The idea with the snowball is you pay off the lowest one first, regardless of the interest rates. You pay off the lowest one first. Mind you, with all of your debts, side note, make sure to make at least the minimum payment on all of your debts. Every single debt you have, make sure to make at least the minimum payment. And we'll talk about why that's important later on in this episode, because we're going to talk a little bit about credit. But make sure to pay the least, at least the minimum. Now, with the snowball effect, you pay off that $2,000 first while paying the minimum on the 5 and the 10. Once you pay off the $2,000 debt, whatever you were paying towards that $2,000 debt, you now pay that into the $5,000 debt on top of what you were already paying, right? So you don't just now pocket what you were paying towards the $2,000 because you paid it off. You actually take whatever you were paying towards it and add it onto the $5,000 debt. Once you're done paying the $5,000 debt, whatever you were paying towards the 2 and the 5, you now put towards the $10,000, thereby snowballing your payments. Hence, snowball effect or snowball method, right? Now, another one is the avalanche method. And depending on where you are, you might need to use a different approach, right? We're going to talk about a few of them. You might need to use specifically one of these. However, in whichever case or situation, I vouch for the avalanche, depending on the situation, I should say. Because what this is doing is essentially saving you money. Because with the avalanche method, what you do is you take the highest interest that you have outstanding. So let's say you have those same 3 debts. One of them is 19,000, one of them is say 15, another one is 17. Sorry, not 1,000% interest. So one of them is 20%, one of them is 15%, another one's 17%. What you want to do with the avalanche method is pay the highest interest first. So you're going to start with that 20% interest. And once that's paid off, same idea as you're going to take whatever you were paying towards the 20, put it towards the 15. And again, you're making sure to make the minimum payment on all of these at all times, at least. But whatever you're paying towards the 20, once that's paid off, you now put that into the 17. Once you're done with the 17 and the 20, you put that into the 15, right? So it's like an avalanche. You're going from top to bottom, all right? Another method is a debt consolidation. So this is where you go to a lender and let's say, again, you have 3 debts outstanding and their credit card, there might be a line of credit mixed in there, but they're high interest, let's say 15 to again 20%. What you do now is you go to a lender and they will, or a bank, and they will then give you a loan to consolidate everything. So let's say those 3 debts that you have outstanding equal to $15,000. Instead of having to pay different cards each time and the minimum interest on each of these, you can get a debt consolidation loan where now you're paying the minimum on, let's say, what is a 10% interest, and you have the 15 all in one place now. So it's easier for you to manage. It's all in one place, and the interest is going to likely be less. However, be careful with that because we're going to talk about credit age. When you do that, sometimes the lender or bank will ask you to close your 3 lines of credit, whether it's a credit card or whatever the case is. So be careful with that piece. We'll talk about why that's important later. So debt consolidation, right? That's another method. Another method is the balance transfer. So let's say, again, you have those same 3 debts, 20 to 15%, and then you have another line of credit, let's say, that's lower interest, which is 10. And this is your personal. You already have this. You don't have to go to a lender to get it. You already have these things available to you. What you can do is take those debts that are 20 to 15% and then just transfer the balance over to your line of credit, which is lower, 10%. Same idea, except you're doing it personally, right? You're just transferring the balance over to something else, which is lower interest. So it's easier for you to manage, of course. And again, you're paying less interest, right? So that's called a balance transfer. Another method is to, of course, increase your income, as we all know. Sometimes I get it. It's easier said than done. But increase your income, whether that's finding a new job or finding other sources that you can add, things that you can do, let's say on the side, like we talked about, turning your passion into profit. Start doing that to get some more income to then put towards debts and other things, of course. I wouldn't say necessarily put it all towards debt, but depending on the situation you're in, you might need to. All right. So that's another method. And put excess towards debt. When you get your tax return, we talked about paying yourself first. When you get your tax return, do whatever you need to do with it in terms of budgeting and, paying yourself first. But instead of going to buy a new phone or buy a new handbag or whatever a new console, whatever it is that you want, put that towards a debt. Don't live so much in the present, but set yourself up for the future. So pay off that debt, get it off your back, and again, increase your sense of financial security, because as long as that debt is there, you're likely going to have that financial insecurity. All right. So that is another method. And there is another one, but we'll talk about that shortly. The next thing that I want to talk about is building and maintaining a healthy score. So again, credit. And there's a few factors in this one. But first of all, let's talk about what is credit and what is a credit report. So a credit report is, I've heard it described this way, and I've been using it ever since. It's essentially your financial report card. And what it does is it tells the lender or banker or wherever you're going to try to get a loan or some type of financial aid or assistance or loan or whatever it might be. It tells them your credit worthiness, right? Are you an A plus? Do you have a B plus? Do you have a C, C minus, D, right? Some of us might have an F. That's what your credit report tells these lenders, right? So whenever you go to try to get a loan, a mortgage, a car, a new phone, that's why they want to pull your credit, because it tells them, should I trust this person? Even when you're going to try to rent a place, should I trust this person? That's what that credit report and credit score tells them. Yes or no. They're somewhat trustworthy. They're not so trustworthy. They're very trustworthy. That's what they see when they look at your credit report. So again, absolutely, this is important. If any of you ever want to own a home, you got to make sure you have some decent credit. If you want to own a vehicle, same idea. If you want to get a phone or open up certain bank accounts or start a business, they look at your personal credit. All right. At least where I'm at, that's what they do. Maybe not so much in the States. I'm not entirely sure. Actually, I know sometimes in the States they don't, but over here, yes, they do in Canada. All right. So be mindful of that. That's why it's so important to make sure you at least pay the minimum on all your credit, or rather on all your outstanding debt, because it affects your credit. So some of the factors that do affect your credit are utilization. So what that means is how much do you have available to you in total, right? Let's say you have, for the sake of numbers, 100,000 available to you in terms of credit. If you are using 30,000 out of that 100, then your credit utilization is at 30%. Ideally, you want to keep it 30 or lower, right? 30 or lower. You don't want to go to 40 because then you're in another tier and it's going to affect your credit. You don't want to go to 70 because then you're in another tier and it's going to affect your credit. 90, it's going to affect your credit. You want to keep it as low as possible. Ideally, no more than 30. If you can keep it around 10 or lower percent, that's even better, right? So again, that makes up 30% of your score. Utilization makes up 30% of your credit score. So that's why, you got to pay attention to the utilization, how much you have available and how much you have outstanding. Another thing is credit history. So credit history makes up 15% of your score. And what that is the length or the age of your credit. So if all of your credit, you've had cards for 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, they take the average age of all of those cards and line of credits and all the debt or lines of credit that you have reporting into your report. When I say lines of credit, I mean a line of credit, I mean a credit card, a MasterCard, a finance, a lease, all these other things, right? Whatever loans you might have, those are all considered lines of credit reporting into your credit report. So whatever the age is, the average age, obviously the longer the better. If it's 5+ years, you're in great standing. If it's less than that, we need some work. But there's not much you can do about that, except if you have a low age or you don't have any credit per se, get a card as soon as possible and put even just the smallest thing, your phone bill, put your phone bill on there, right? That way they actually see that you're using credit. But get a small card now. If you don't trust yourself, $500 limit, $1,000 limit, doesn't have to be anything big, but do that so you can actually start building some credit. Put the smallest bill on there and just automatically have your checking account send the money to pay that credit card off, right? Because if you're not building credit, you won't necessarily be able to buy a home, let's say, or to get a vehicle in the future for financing a vehicle if you wanted to do that. If you want to own a home or you want to use credit in these ways, start building your credit. And credit is something that you can use for your benefit for a few different things, which we'll talk about shortly as well. All right, so that was a side note. Public records. If you've ever been sent to collections, you have a bankruptcy or anything along those lines, those affect your score as well, of course. 10% is how much that affects it. Number of inquiries. So this makes up 10% of your credit. What this means is, let's say you want to go apply for a new cell phone, a new car, a mortgage. All these things do what's called a hard inquiry on your credit. So they check your credit report, and it affects you, of course, because if you have a certain amount of inquiries, it affects your score and it brings it down. But even when they do a check just one time, it can affect it and bring it down maybe 10 points or so, but it can rebound pretty quickly as long as you don't have too many hits. All right. And a tip on that as well is, if you are looking for a mortgage, you have a certain time frame, and I don't remember the exact time frame, but it might be 30 days or so. Check it up online just to verify. But when you check, you're trying to get a mortgage, right? The first lender, they'll look at your credit. Once they do that, you have maybe a 2-week to 30-day period where you can actually go and get other lenders to check it, where it doesn't affect you because your credit's already open. So keep that in mind and use that as a strategy to actually shop around without really affecting your score too much. But again, look up online what that time frame is depending on where you are. So yes, number of inquiries, 10%. Payment history, the biggest one, right? The last and the biggest one. This makes up 35% of your score, 35%. And what payment history is, this is why I recommend, and I keep saying, make sure you make at least the minimum payment on all of your outstanding debt, because this is what they look at. And this makes up the biggest portion of your score, 35%. If you missed payments, it's going to affect you quite a bit, right? So make at least the minimum payment. I can't emphasize that enough, on all of your outstanding debt, because they look at the payment history. Because again, if you lend me money, you lend me $5,000. I tell you, yeah, I'm going to pay you back on schedule and so on. This is the schedule we come up with. You tell me, we agree to it. I sign the document, whatever the case is, but I don't stick to it. And I miss payments, and I tell you, oh, I'll get you next week. Oh, I'll get you in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, you're depending on my money to pay the mortgage. Meanwhile, you're depending on my money to pay you so that you can then, send your kids to school or whatever it might be. You're going to have a problem with me, and you might never lend me money again. Right? Now, if I go to somebody else and you tell them that experience you had with lending me money before, they're probably not going to lend me money. This is your credit report. This is how it works. All right. And that's how much payment history affects your score. 35%, the biggest one. So make sure you're on track with your payments. One other thing about credit real quick is regularly look at your credit report. I highly recommend regularly checking your credit report, whether it's once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month. Check your credit report, because you might notice things on there that are inaccurate, that are going to affect you negatively if you don't do something about it. Because you can actually do something called a dispute. You can dispute what's on your credit report. You can go online, look up how to do it, but essentially you're sending in letters or contacting Equifax or TransUnion and telling them, listen, this is not right, this is not accurate. I paid this off, but it's saying I didn't pay it off. Why is that? Or whatever the case is. You send them a letter to say, yeah, it's been closed and paid. They'll make the update, and then your score will, of course, be better for it. Your credit report will look better, because some of us might have. I remember actually when I was in college, there was a Canadian Tire MasterCard that I got from a gas station when I was in college. They offered it to me, and I was like, okay, sure. Not knowing much about finances or credit cards and necessarily how they work, but I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take one. And this specific or particular card, you had to call them to find out what the outstanding balance was. So I remember I called them and they told me what the balance was, and I sent in the money. But maybe by the time they received it, I was already billed again, and interest was added on top of my payment. I didn't know that the interest was there, so I only paid the amount that I was told. Years later, I try to go and get a new cell phone, and they deny me. I'm like, wait a second, but I have good credit. Last time I checked, I don't really have anything on my report, and I keep my credit card, but my one MasterCard up to date. What's the issue? And lo and behold, when I checked my credit report, that MasterCard, that Canadian Tire MasterCard, had an outstanding balance that I was unaware of. This is why it's important to check your credit report, because it will affect you in ways that you're not aware of. Or when it happens, you're like, what's going on? Why is this happening? Until you look at your credit report, you don't realize. But of course, I noticed it after the fact, paid it off, and I was good to go from there. So definitely regularly check your credit report because it will affect you in ways that you're unaware of, and it will throw you a curveball, if you say, or if you want to say it that way, that will, of course, throw you off if you don't know what's on there. All right. Now, how can you leverage credit? This is a big one because I feel like a lot of us kind of, shy away from credit and leveraging it, especially when you come from the middle income class, like myself, because we always hear stay away from debt, right? Save money and stay away from debt, which is the advice comes from a good place. I'll put it that way. The advice comes from a good place, but is it the best advice? Who knows, right? I'd argue no, it's not. And one of the reasons is because using your credit to your benefit will help you to get ahead. Look up a good credit card, right? One that gives you good rewards. Because right now, all of us are just using our debit cards. And it's been said this way before. Shout out to David Shan's Social Proof Podcast. He said it this way. Now, I've always known this, but the way he said it, I appreciated it. If you are using your debit card, you are financially irresponsible. You are financially irresponsible if you're using your debit card. Now, don't shoot me in the foot. This is the words of David Shantz. So I agree with it, though, because to a degree, right? Your debit card is not giving you any rewards. Your credit card will give you rewards if you have a good credit card. There's RBC Avion, there's Amex, there's a whole bunch of different cards, of course, that you can go look at depending on whatever's best for you to get free flights, to get, free movies, to get free meals at restaurants, to then turn your points into gift cards and go give those out to people or use those for your benefit. Get hotels, vacations. You can use these rewards to then fund your vacation, to then fund your grocery bill. To whatever benefit you need, you can go look up a card specifically for that online and you will see which one's the best for what you want. So if you use these cards, mind you, the idea is not to spend more than you normally would just because you're using a credit card that's available to you. If you know you're not necessarily disciplined in that matter, be careful with it. But just put the automatic things, automatic bills onto your card then. Like I mentioned before, your phone bill, your internet bill. The regular things that come out, you can put those onto your credit card. And again, just set up the automatic transfer to pay off the card at the end of every month or just before the end of every month. Because that way, again, you're paying these bills that you have to pay anyway, but you're also getting rewards and points. All right. So definitely leverage your credit card for these things. And then once you pay it off, for whatever reason, if you find you don't have the money, definitely take a second look at it. That's why your budget is so important. But worst case scenario, you don't have it, transfer it to your line of credit if you have one because it's lower interest. Safely build your credit. That's what this will allow you to do, is to safely build your credit. And again, put those small bills on there. If you don't trust yourself, just put the small bills on there and automatically pay those off every month. Now, velocity banking is a way that you can also leverage your credit. And this is also a method to pay down your debts if you have any. So I know a lot of people, and I was in a situation, and currently I'm using velocity banking as well, but where you have debts, right? Or I had debts. And what I would do with velocity banking, I explained a little bit before in a previous episode, but you're taking your whole paycheck essentially, and you're dropping it onto your line of credit. Of course, you got to make sure the money is where it needs to be for the bills to come out. But once you do that, and actively at the same time, I'm using my credit card, my Amex, to, of course, pay everything. If I'm buying food, it's on the Amex. If I'm buying gas, it's on the Amex. If I go out to the movies or wherever I might go, Amex, right? Because I know it's giving me rewards. But all of my bills will come off that Amex card or out of my line of credit. I drop my whole paycheck, for the most part, onto my line of credit, and I use my line of credit for everything. That or my Amex card, like I said, because the points. So at the end of every month, whatever's outstanding on, let's say, the Amex card, I'll take from the line of credit and drop it onto the Amex card. Right? Velocity banking. I've said it this way before, And actually, okay, I'll paraphrase this because you've heard this before. Money should be like a river, constantly flowing. That's why the velocity banking method is so important, because it kind of ties into that. If your money is sitting still, or rather if water, synonymous, is sitting still, it's going to become a swamp. It's going to be infested with mosquitoes and, just mud, and no one wants to go into a swamp because it's nasty. It's dirty. But a clean flowing river, you can drink from a river. If you're ever in the wild, that's what they tell you to do. Find clean flowing water, because that's likely the cleanest water that you can drink. But you don't want to go to a swamp and take water. Your money needs to be flowing like a river so that you can actually, of course, keep it flowing and make the money that you need to make. Use it to your benefit. If it's sitting still in the bank account, not really building anything for you, what is it doing? What are you doing? I question you. Because again, situational, circumstantial, this isn't necessarily advice. This is just something to think on, because I haven't seen your personal situation, so I couldn't give you advice. But take a look at what you're doing right now with your finances. If you have money over $5,000 sitting in a bank account, ask yourself why. If there's a good reason for it, cool. If there's not, why do you need 5,000 sitting in there? Why do you need 10,000 sitting in there? It's likely unreasonable or unnecessary. Right? So again, keep your money flowing. And again, that kind of ties into the velocity banking. All right. I'm trying to keep this one short. That's why I was talking a little fast today, so forgive me. But hopefully you found this beneficial, right? So thank you for joining me, of course, Kadeem McLean, as we share some stories and some strategies, and hopefully you feel better equipped and empowered to manage and tackle your finances and your personal growth. If you're looking for more insights, more stories, more strategies, follow me on social media. Links are in the description below. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, and share it with somebody who might benefit from it, because somebody who might need to see this or might benefit from it won't be able to see it unless you do share it with them. Join me next time for more stories, strategies, and insights on moving towards becoming the optimal version of you. All right, and remember, each step you take is moving you closer to the optimal version of you. All right, we'll see you next time.